2 years ago, a team of seed investigators realized there was a seed hidden in the background of this painting. But they weren't the only ones. A single seed finder would unknowingly race against the entire team. But did either of them actually find the seed, and how did it all start? Picture this, it's the 8th of June and the seed hunters only have one thing on their mind, finding a clearer image of the skull and fire painting. After all, the background of the painting had been hiding through the game's pixels for years, forcing the investigators to visit Christopher Zetterstrand's website, who is the artist behind nearly every painting in Minecraft, including the skull painting. But there was one serious problem. All these Minecraft paintings weren't just unpixelated now, but they were actually painted, making them totally useless to the investigation, as the details the seed hunters needed were just way too inaccurate but super cool to look at. But this wasn't the end of the road. An investigator named Tom emailed Christopher directly, asking if he still had in-game images of the skull seed location, and then they nervously waited for a reply. 2 weeks went past, and surprisingly, Christopher had answered his question, telling Tom the chances were nearly impossible, but that he would do some digging. And to Christopher's own amazement, he had found it, an exact original in-game screenshot that the painting was actually based off. This was a huge step forward for the team, but the odds were still against them, as the in-game screenshot was in horrible quality. However, the team were determined to get to the bottom of this. Now, this part is ridiculously crazy to me, because the investigators managed to find the dimensions of the monitor Christopher actually used to take the screenshot originally. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, how did they figure that out? Well, let me explain. You see, in early versions of the game, taking screenshots was impossible, so Christopher had to resort to screenshotting his entire desktop, and using the only information on when the screenshot was saved. Tom and the rest of the investigators were able to collect a clearer image using an artificial intelligence that matched and remade the screenshot in a higher quality altogether. Although clearing up the image even with artificial intelligence wasn't the easiest job, it had to be trained on how to recognize Minecraft images. And one of the most interesting problems that the investigators faced was when using nighttime screenshots. As they were so dark, they had to teach the AI how to brighten it. So with the AI creating a clearer screenshot and the realization that the date of when the screenshot was exported was in 2010, the investigators realized the screenshot could have only been captured in one Minecraft version, Alpha 1.1.2, which narrowed things down significantly. Oh, and there were also other images that backed up that evidence, such as a screenshot of Christopher testing multiplayer with Notch on a lower version of Minecraft 2 months prior, narrowing things down even more. So after discovering the version of Minecraft the original image was taken on, and getting hold of a higher quality version altogether, it was time for the team to try matching the screenshot to the perspective of what you would see in-game. To put it simply, they had to stand on the right block. Well, sort of. Since the image was cropped, they had to match the top of Steve's hand and where the crosshair would have been if it wasn't edited out. But thankfully, bits and pieces still remained in the image, and it was aligned perfectly. The next thing they looked at was the orientation of the moon. Can you believe it? The moon. As in older versions, the sun and moon both rise in the north, being upright, and set in the south upside down. So the investigators knew the image was facing north. The next thing they looked at were the clouds, since clouds aren't just a random loop of textures, allowing them to figure out a relatively good idea of where Christopher was standing whilst taking the screenshot. Talk about being a Minecraft forecaster. I had no idea this was even possible. Here's a diagram of how they calculated the clouds. I still have no idea how it works, but regardless, it's pretty cool to look at. Oh, and fun fact, the cloud method that they used is also how griefers can find your base, even if your coordinates are hidden. Wait, how did you find me?
Clouds.
The clouds?
The clouds.
Since the investigators knew a rough amount of time the world was played on, they were able to match up the location even more accurately than before, since the clouds constantly move in one direction. But once the investigators had figured out the closest location Christopher could have been standing, they started examining the flower patches inside of the image. They expected to crack the seed pretty quickly using their placement, as there were only a total of 2 flower patches. Now that probably sounds completely wrong, but this is where the investigation takes a real turn. It turns out the 3rd flower patch was actually a super rare occurrence, containing 18 individual flowers. This wasn't just confusing for the investigators, but misleading, as they didn't know whether to count the flower patches they were looking at as 2 patches that appear to be one, or 3 individual groups of flowers. So which one would help them get closer to the seed? Despite the doubt, the investigators focused their attention on the bigger patch of flowers, hoping it would give the answers they needed. But what they were about to discover next would completely shock them. Yeah, that wasn't really needed. My bad. Let me introduce you to Andrew, a seed finder who believed the answers were still hidden within the flowers. It just needed time. So he did exactly that, focusing entirely on the flowers alone, leaving the team behind and unknowingly starting a race to who could uncover the seed first. Would it be him, or would it be Tom and the rest of the investigators? Time would only tell, because the results the investigators had uncovered would set them back a mile. The team had found nothing. That's right, the coordinates were wrong, and just like that, it seemed like they were back at square one. But there was one last chance. You see, they could use the height of dirt blocks to get a more accurate position on where Christopher stood, and chunk barriers to get a better alignment, giving them the opportunity to set up a server and recreate the Skull and Fire location, in-game block for block, with of course the help of their most skilled builders and an overlay website that would update every 5 seconds, leaving no room for error to their recreation of the Skull and Fire seed. However, as Tom and the rest of the investigators started rolling forward with their next attempt, Andrew had been focusing all of his energy into the flower coordinates. He knew there was something special about them, as patches with over 12 flowers are considered to be a one of a kind, and this world had 18. Because of this, he developed his own code to be 1,000 times faster than what the investigators had been originally working at, and fortunately for him, he also had no bugs or technical issues when developing this code, allowing him to do it all from his own computer, worry-free. But there was one issue. Despite Andrew's method having no technical issues, it still had a 5% chance of being completely wrong, and if so, he would have been thrown off the entire search just like Tom and the rest of the investigators. To add to this, if and when he would find the seed, he would still have to narrow it down himself, without the help of code to truly find the seed. But Andrew was clearly onto something, and after a couple days of searching, that something would finally reveal itself. Andrew had sent an image to Tom and the rest of the investigators, with the caption, "Painting, but there's snow everywhere." The investigators went crazy. Was this actually the seed? They interrogated Andrew and questioned his every method and technique. And what would you know, he'd finally found the seed. Although, why was it covered in snow, and what were the finer details to Andrew's search? You see, Andrew had optimized his code to run 36 billion times per second, and impressively enough, he managed to pull it off, allowing him to filter it all down to 80 possible seeds, where he manually picked the correct world, or worlds should I say, since Andrew had discovered 2 near identical seeds generated with the exact same landscape, which is quite common with seed hunting. And for the snow, well, it turned out to be a simple feature in early versions of Minecraft, where there was a 25% chance that the world would generate with snow. So after Andrew focused on the flower patches, coded an entire different way of getting to the seed, and being interrogated by other fellow investigators, Andrew had officially won the seed finding race, closing the case and making him the first person to discover the seed tucked secretly behind the Skull and Fire painting. So the next time you place a painting and the skull appears, remember, there's a lot more behind it than what meets the eye. But there's one major problem. After watching this video and finding the seed, you're going to want to watch another. But don't worry, the video on screen is just as good.